Australian tennis player was crowned champion of the world last Tuesday afternoon. What's more, he beat another Australian in the final. So why didn't his victory create headlines? Well, you could say that Rob Fahey plays a different kind of tennis to Agassi or Sampras. Jeff Hutchison went to the Hobart Tennis Club to watch those who wield the wood.
Once you play it until you drop. And there have been quite a few deaths on court over the years, just the old guys refuse to give it up. As long as there are a handful of those guys, it won't die, and right now we're sort of going along quite nicely.
You're looking at Australia's one real tennis champion. He's not some young pretender hurried along by hype or headlines or headbands. No slick sporting goods manufacturer pays him millions to endorse their equipment. In fact, before he starts hitting the cover off the ball, he has to make it. His name is Rob Fahey. Around here, they call him Rob Fahey. He's too unassuming to even have a nickname. What he can boast is supremacy in a competition so old, it makes Wimbledon seem positively new age.
The records sort of show that they were competing for the World Championship the mid-1700s, so we sort of think 1740, and it's been continuous since then. So it's apparently the longest running continuous World Championship of any sport.
First played by hand in the streets and monasteries of France in the 13th century, real tennis, or royal tennis, or le jeu de quarte paume, was once the king of racket sports. Unfortunately, some upstart had to spoil it all by suggesting how much more fun we'd all have if we went outside and played on the lawn. Lawn tennis, it'll never catch on. It did, of course, but the indoor game held firm. It still has its devotees drawn to its extraordinary history and the enormous challenge of actually playing it well.
Most of the courts in the world have got concrete floors. It means two things. First of all, we have to have really, really strong legs. Second of all, we get an awful lot of injuries. The last 500 years, we've managed to go from our hands to this high-tech piece of wood. These are all made in England, and you might have noticed that they're a slightly odd shape in that the head is a little off-centre. The reason for that is the ball, being so hard, doesn't bounce that high. So we've had to move the centre of the racket into this area here. There is a sweet spot in there somewhere. It's about the size of a 20-cent piece, and don't see many people hitting it.
For the past 5 months, Rob Fahey has been spending countless hours on that cold concrete in search of that sweet spot, preparing to put his world title on the line. The reigning champion enters the competition with a distinct advantage. He chooses where and when he wants to play, and like an America's Cup defender, waits in the final for his opponent to turn up.
They have a Challenger series. There were 4 of them this time, which is quite unusual. Normally it's 1 or 2. So they've been playing off for the last 3 months to see who gets through to play me.
Is it a pretty cosy situation to be in? There can't be too many sports where the reigning world champion says, I'm going to defend it on this day at this place. I expect you to be there.
Yeah, it's weighted in my favour, definitely. But the reason for that is to make sure that anybody that can beat the champion is worthy.
If that sounds a little pompous, you should have heard them in the old days. Back then, if a champion didn't want to defend his title, he simply wouldn't. Look, sorry, old chap, don't feel like it this year. Come back in about a decade.